Okay, I think it's time for our last one. All right, please welcome the final thesis for the 2025-2026 school year, Julia Rhodes with her thesis, Going Private, Improving Air Travel by Privatizing Air Traffic Control. Let's give her a hand.
In the early hours of May 9, 2025, Jane sits in the Air Traffic Control Center at Newark International Airport alone. Dozens of planes dot her radar as she guides 4 commercial planes preparing to land. Suddenly, her screens go black. The planes disappear from her radar. Her radio fails, cutting her communication with the pilots. 30 seconds. The backup is not working. 60 seconds. Still black. For 90 seconds, Jane stands there frozen as the pilots blindly approach the airport. Her mind immediately jumps to the worst possibilities. What would happen to the planes? How many people were on board? Their lives were in her hands, but in an instant she lost all power to protect them. She later recounted, quote, "Being at the control without any of our signals is like trying to dodge mines without a mine detector," end quote. When the radar and radio finally clicked back on, Jane regained visuals and communications, worked in constant fear of another equipment failure. The FAA addressed this adage, acknowledging that the, quote, "system is outdated and showing its age," end quote. This incident shook this 16-year veteran controller so much that she was put on stress trauma leave to help her cope and recover, and the already understaffed control center was down another controller. Jane remarked that, quote, "If immediate changes aren't made, people will pay with their lives," end quote. Aviation began in 1903 when the Wright brothers flew their first plane, but commercial flights did not emerge until the mid-1920s. As the industry grew, the federal government began stepping in. In the 1930s, the government assumed control of the first air traffic control centers, becoming responsible for communication during flights, while individual airports maintained responsibility for communication during takeoff and landing. However, as World War II threatened the U.S., President Franklin Roosevelt expanded the government's power to control both communication during flights as well as during taxi, takeoff, and landing. After the war, the government retained control of all air traffic control services. As air traffic has grown exponentially over the years, people have recognized problems with the FAA as a service provider and safety regulator dependent on government funds. To improve efficiency and quality in the air traffic control industry, experts have suggested separating air traffic control operations from the government. Most notably, in 2017, Congressman Bill Chester proposed the 21st Century Air Act that would have established the American Air Navigation Services Corporation as a private, not-for-profit corporation to take over the operational duties of the FAA's air traffic services. This private corporation would have taken over communicating with pilots and safely guiding air traffic during all parts of the flight: taxi, takeoff, mid-air cruising, and landing. This corporation would have been run by a board of directors, composed of representatives of pilots, controllers, large passenger airlines, small passenger airlines, cargo airlines, private airlines, and the government. The FAA would have remained in place to regulate safety standards. However, this bill failed to gain enough support in Congress and expired at the end of the congressional term, leaving the air traffic control system issues unresolved. Congress should pass a bill modeled after the 21st Century Air Act, establishing a private, not-for-profit corporation to assume control of the FAA's air traffic services. First, Congress should pass this bill because the current government-run system fails to provide sustainable quality service. Second, turning air traffic control over to a private corporation would make the system safer and more efficient. And lastly, privatizing air traffic control in this way has proven beneficial elsewhere. First, the government system currently in place fails to provide quality service because of inadequate funding, outdated technology, and staffing shortages. In 2023, the FAA conducted a study to evaluate the risk and sustainability of their air traffic control technology systems. They found that 29 of their 138 air traffic control systems urgently needed technology updates to continue operating safely and efficiently. However, funding for updates for these systems was 6 to 10 years away, and some outdated systems had no investments planned. That means that right now, under the current government structure, more than 1 out of every 5 of our air traffic control systems are in critical condition and not scheduled to receive the funding needed for improvement. Presently, the FAA is funded by the Airport and Airway Trust Fund and the General Fund from Congress. The Airport and Airway Trust Fund collects money from excise taxes on domestic plane tickets, international arrivals and departures, cargo, and aviation fuel. This makes up over half of the FAA's funds. The remaining funding comes through the general fund from Congress. However, the White House Office of Management and Budget, which looks to limit government spending, must approve all FAA budget requests before Congress can appropriate its annual funds. And this is where air traffic control often gets its funding cut. Without sufficient money from Congress, large-scale modernization and updates to critical air traffic control systems has been impossible. In fact, just this past July, Congress approved $12.5 billion towards modernizing air traffic control. But Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy urged that at least another $19 billion was needed to adequately move modernization forward. This problem is not new. Back in 2003, the FAA planned to implement the Next Generation Air Transportation System, or NextGen, into national airspace. This plan included improvements in airport infrastructure and technology to safely reduce the separation between aircraft, accommodating more air traffic and reducing delays. It would have also provided more direct and efficient routes, saving time and fuel. These updates were scheduled to begin immediately and to be completely implemented by 2025. However, the Department of Transportation's Office of Inspector General released a report on October 1st, 2025, based on a 2024 audit of NextGen's implementation and success. The report concluded that the program was years behind schedule, with many parts delayed until at least 2030, and that it was significantly over budget, leading to the loss of billions of dollars in benefits. By 2025, NextGen was predicted to save $213 billion due to higher efficiency and fuel savings. But because of delays in funding, these savings only amounted to $9.9 billion by 2025. The government-run system also proves deficient during government shutdowns. During the 2025 politically heated government shutdown, funding stopped flowing to air traffic control. Air traffic controllers did not get paid during the entire 43 days of this shutdown. Despite this, they were still expected to show up to work, one of the most stressful jobs, not knowing when their next paycheck would come. Because of this, many controllers called in sick, not to avoid work, but to work other part-time paying jobs just to cover their bills. Another shutdown in 2018 to 2019 saw the same issue. Without sufficient air traffic controllers, flights all across the country were delayed and canceled at alarmingly high rates. For example, on Thursday, October 30th, 2025, Orlando International Airport had to delay departures an average of nearly 3 hours and significantly reduce the rate of arrivals because of a shortage of air traffic controllers. For a short time, no flight could land in Orlando because one of the control towers had no certified air traffic controllers on duty. The current system dependent on government funding can't continue. It's too slow, too political, and too unreliable. Second, turning air traffic control over to a private corporation would improve its efficiency and safety by providing a clear, reliable budget and a better structure to successfully replace old technology with modern innovation. Right now, the U.S. Department of Transportation admits that the only way to keep the airspace safe with the outdated and declining technology is to reduce the amount of air traffic. What this means for passengers is delayed and canceled flights. But a funding alternative available to a private corporation is revenue bonds, which the FAA is currently not allowed to issue. Revenue bonds work like this. Investors buy bonds to quickly provide the money needed to pay for improvement projects, and the bonds are paid back with interest over many years from the corporation's revenue. Because the FAA can currently only finance modernization projects like NextGen 1 year at a time with the money from Congress, implementing a long-term plan has been nearly impossible. So instead of waiting for money from Congress, which may or may not come, the privatized model will allow for quicker access through the bond market to the funds needed to finally implement new technologies like NextGen and improve efficiency in air travel. NextGen benefits include shorter passenger travel time, more direct routes, fewer delays, and an airspace that can accommodate more air traffic. Additionally, it will lower aircraft operating costs and save fuel, lowering carbon emissions. The privatized model also bypasses congressional funding by requiring those who use the airspace to pay the corporation directly. According to economist Dorothy Robin, quote, "The current system of tax financing encourages commercial airlines to overuse scarce air traffic control capacity because they pay for that capacity indirectly through passenger ticket taxes rather than directly for each use." End quote. The private funding model, where the users, the airlines, must pay for air traffic control directly removes the obstacle of Congress and incentivizes airlines to make better use of the airspace. Additionally, the private model would promote safety by updating and replacing old technology. An air traffic controller who works at the Philadelphia Control Center said, quote, "We've been experiencing repeat power failures in Philadelphia due to poor technology. We warned the Federal Aviation Authority that the system would be overwhelmed if the infrastructure and equipment was not expanded there, but they did not listen." End quote. She says that starting in late 2024, their control tower had at least 12 communication systems failures in 10 months. Thankfully, nothing serious happened. That's a dozen times people's lives were in danger. The FAA is failing to update the needed systems, endangering safety in the sky. The privatized model would allow for needed technology updates to keep the system safer. Also, privatizing would promote safety by providing a less stressful working environment for controllers. Not only would they have more confidence in their technology, but they would be confident in their paycheck, which would be protected from government shutdowns. During the 2025 government shutdown, Air Traffic Controller Nick Daniels spoke about safety. He said, quote, "I'm going to work right now, and I'm thinking about how do I pay my rent? Rent is due in a few days. How do I put food on the table? How do I put gas in my car just to show up to work?" And those are levels of safety that are being reduced in the system. And the flying public doesn't deserve that. End quote. If air traffic controllers don't have to worry about when they are next getting paid, they can better focus on ensuring safety for flights. The privatized model would not fail during government shutdowns. Its revenue source would be immune to politics and would be sufficient to update systems, raise aviation efficiency, and better protect the skies. Third, this privatization model has been shown to be beneficial elsewhere. Canada implemented an almost identical private model and has reaped its benefits. NAV Canada was established in 1996 as a private, government-chartered, not-for-profit corporation that assumed the government's old job of operating air traffic control. In the 1990s, Canadian technology and infrastructure drastically needed renovation, but their funding came in the same inconsistent way as ours does now, through ticket taxes and funding from Parliament, their Congress. The original government provider, Transport Canada, was too underfunded, could not provide the needed innovation in a timely manner, and was overburdened with government oversight agencies. Canada sought a solution to these problems and decided to privatize. Since privatization, the financial benefits have been evident. Canada can now promptly implement new technologies, allowing them to cut costs by operating more efficiently. For example, before privatizing, installing the radar modernization project required 6 years and around $18 million, while similar installations after privatizing only took about 6 months and around $6 million. NAV Canada's air traffic control model has also proven cost-effective. An international organization, CANSO, studied the cost-effectiveness of air navigation service providers around the world in 2016. The report showed that the cost per flight hour for U.S. air traffic control operations was $453, as compared to NAV Canada's $335. NAV Canada delivers its services at a much more efficient rate than the FAA. Similarly, Canada's ability to implement new technologies has allowed them to drop their cost of air traffic control services by 33% from 1996 to 2017, while the U.S. has seen an increase of 66% over this same time. In April 2025, NAV Canada implemented new satellite-based technology that provides more direct routes that depend less on physical infrastructure. This technology also increases runway availability and improves safety, especially in remote and mountainous regions. NAV Canada credits these innovations to their private model, a model with a customer-focused culture led by a board of directors that seeks to provide high-quality air traffic services. They completed the implementation of this new satellite technology within the planned 6-year timeline, whereas the FAA, stuck waiting for the U.S. government, has not come close to implementing NextGen within the planned timeline. Facing the same problems plaguing the FAA today, Transport Canada created a more efficient model with better cost effectiveness by privatizing. The U.S. could see these same benefits if they follow suit. While Canada is the most similar model, with a private, not-for-profit corporation, other large countries have characteristics of the proposed private model which have shown to be beneficial. Aviation expert Robert Poole, who has been studying privatization for almost 50 years, conducted a study on innovation and efficiency in the U.S. air traffic control systems as compared to corporatized models in other countries. He found that other countries were more innovative than the FAA, placing a higher emphasis on efficiency in their systems. He cited the following 3 reasons for this, which 15 peer reviewers agreed with. The first is the separation of the operational side of air traffic control from the safety side. This has been the International Civil Aviation Organization's recommended policy for over 20 years to encourage efficiency through innovation while regulating safety through a separate entity. Who found that countries like New Zealand, Australia, and Great Britain, who all follow this policy, are much quicker to accept and implement new techniques and technologies. Under the proposed private model, the FAA would regulate safety, while the American Air Navigation Services Corporation would control the operations. The second reason for more innovation elsewhere is the use of the funding model with user-funded fees rather than government appropriations, which puts the corporation's focus on their actual customers, the airlines, rather than the government. This user-funded model is followed by countries like Australia, Germany, and Great Britain, who have all been able to implement new efficient technologies that the U.S. hasn't. The U.S. is far behind these countries in new technology innovations like improved digital communications, GPS, and landing technologies. The third reason Poole cited is being governed by those with a direct interest in the industry. Air traffic control in countries like Australia, New Zealand, and Germany is governed by a board of directors who are qualified in their position and have a direct interest in the industry. These countries don't have to work through numerous government agencies, which saves time and effort. The board of directors established in the U.S. corporation would eliminate multiple government agencies and congressional committees that the FAA must currently work through, helping promote efficiency and innovation in the U.S. air traffic control systems as well. Many argue that making air traffic control a private entity will raise prices and make air travel more expensive and less accessible. But this is not what has happened in Canada. Prices under Private Nav Canada have not seen a jump from prices under the previous government-run system. Even if tickets do increase slightly in their first few years, as the corporation implements new infrastructure and technology, this would be a small price to pay for faster and safer air travel. Also, privatizing will lead to higher prices for private jets, but these users currently only pay about 10% of the actual cost to provide them air traffic control services. Commercial passenger ticket taxes help to cover the rest of their costs. If private jet prices do increase under the proposed private user pay system, it will only be to what's fair, and it will mean that commercial passengers are no longer covering costs for private jets. Another argument against the corporate model is that it will lead to big airline takeover and put smaller airlines out of business. However, the privatized model I'm proposing establishes a governing board where small regional airlines and large passenger airlines both get one representative with one vote. These smaller airlines would still have an equal voice alongside the major ones. Millions of Americans fly every day, placing their lives in the hands of the U.S. air traffic control system, a system currently one blackout away from disaster in the sky. But there is a solution. Congress must pass a bill like the 21st Century Air Act, establishing a private, not-for-profit corporation to operate U.S. air traffic control services. This private corporation will solve the problems of the current government system, providing more efficient and safer service. The solution has worked elsewhere, and it can work here too. Congress must do its job to represent its people. Air traffic controllers want to know that they will show up to work with technology and paychecks that they can depend on. Passengers and crew want to step on a plane knowing that they are going to take off and land safely. Jane warns that we need to make changes to the U.S. air traffic control system or people will pay with their lives. That cost is too high. It's time for Congress to act. It's time to go private. Thank you.
All right, returning once again for the final panel of the season. We have Mrs. Angie Thompson, who is our current SR head. We have Mr. Luke Mars, who is our current SL head. We have Mr. Andy Crone, who was once the chair of our board and now as a board member, he was also our science chair now, science department head, and he also taught a whole bunch of other things in science, and he's good at almost everything he touches. It's obnoxious. We also have Neela Beto, who is our fine arts director and directs several shows a year with the Citizens Theater Company. Okay, you guys know the drill.
Nice job, Julie. I wanted to just follow the money for a sec. So this corporation is going to get their money how?
So the airlines themselves, so like your United, your Southwest, your American, will have to pay the Air Traffic Control Corporation if they want to use the airspace and use the air traffic control services to fly. So they'll be paying the corporation directly.
So would that be on a per flight basis or a per passenger basis?
It's the cost that it would cost them is based on their weight and the distance flown.
So clearly they would be paying a different amount than like a small jet, like you mentioned. But the price of a small jet, putting it in the air, is going to go up.
Yes, because, well, right now, no airline that uses air traffic control has to pay for the services like that. The passengers pay through a ticket tax, so all prices are going to go up.
So when somebody uses their small jet now, do they pay for the air traffic control services?
Do you mean like someone flying just their own private plane?
Or maybe Elon Musk flying in, being flown in his jet?
Right now, all they have to pay is a small fuel tax that goes towards the airport and airway trust fund, but they don't have to pay air traffic control directly.
So they're flying pretty free.
Yes.
Okay, so I recognize an Elon Musk probably should be paying more of a fair share, but what about some guy who owns a Cessna, and he's not necessarily rich, but he wants to fly his plane too. Is he going to have to start paying a air traffic controller fee as well?
Yes, he would, but I think if he wants to be able to fly his plane, even though it will cost him more, he should still have to pay for the services that he is requiring.
And then again, it's going to be based on the weight and the distance, and much lower than a sort of an airline jet.
Yes, so it will, like if it's a small Cessna, it won't cost nearly as much as like a huge plane.
Good job, by the way. I have two questions. So remind me again first, what led to the government deciding to take over for air traffic control? The history lesson, like what was the beginning?
So when aviation first began, there were really no air traffic control centers. It was basically just planes fly in the sky and kind of look around to see if they don't hit anything. And so as more and more planes became a thing and people began flying them more, the government was like, we should probably step in to make sure that people don't crash. And so they made recommendations to a private company to be like, hey, y'all should build some air traffic control centers, and then we'll assume the operation and the cost for them once you build them. And so they kind of incentivized them that way. And then they stepped into those original air traffic control centers. And then when World War II happened, President Franklin Roosevelt, to just kind of make operations uniform in the U.S., just took over all air traffic control services.
Okay. So that makes me think that coming in and doing that during a time of war, that there may have been even some kind of security risk of sorts, that the government felt like that needed to be an area that they oversaw it. Do you think that private businesses could be trusted in such a vulnerable area that where we have planes that could be used as weapons or that sort of thing?
I think since this private corporation is going to be overseen by the safety regulator of the FAA, this FAA is still a government agency and will still be tightly regulating to make sure this private corporation is doing its job and is being safe. And also, the legislation in the bill that I proposed gives the president the power in time of war to take back over air traffic control operations if he needs to.
Good job, Julia. Question for you. You mentioned Canada and that they have successfully employed this model. The air traffic, can you kind of tell me how the air traffic in Canada compares to the air traffic here? I imagine that lot more flights here, and there's a lot more stuff in the sky. So how would that model be scalable, not just in principle, but like objectively scalable here?
So Canada is, we're just over 4 times bigger with the, we operate about 45,000 flights per day, and they operate about 10,000 flights per day. But our airspace is also a lot bigger. We are a much more congested and bigger system than Canada because, like, our population density is a lot bigger. But I don't think just because Canada is smaller in their air traffic control system that they modernized is smaller doesn't mean that that same framework can't be applied to our bigger system. We already have the system in place. We already have a large system that is there. And so if we turn it into a private corporation, all of the infrastructure and equipment that's already there for our large system will already just be transferred. And so it's not like we're having to just build out a lot of new centers. We're just transferring the control. And it is a more congested system, but just because we're bigger doesn't mean that their model won't work for us. It will look different, but it'll just be a bigger scale.
Just to be clear, are we behind Canada?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great job, Ms. Rhodes. Let's go back to the 2017 Air Act. Can you walk us through, why did that fail? Who came out against, I mean, passengers must have loved that idea. Air traffic controllers must have loved that idea. How did that get shot down?
So the bill in 2017 made it out of the House Infrastructure and Transportation Committee, and it never made it to House floor for a full vote, despite it had passed with bipartisan support, and it had the support of the pilots unions, it had the support of the air traffic control unions. Trump supported it, multiple previous transportation secretaries support it. The main proponents against it was the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, who are your general aviation people who fly their Cessnas, who fly their private planes, and they have, like, there's over 500,000 of them across the U.S., and they were very big advocates against it. And I think there were also some congressional concerns about giving up an important industry to a private corporation.
Is that, sorry, follow up. Is that why, I assume then their strategy was to just take care of the funding piece for next gen. Is that what happened next? And then I sense here that there's a funding issue and then there's an operations issue. And so maybe Congress has tried to fix by patchwork the funding issue over time, and we're still seeing an issue in making that, that annual funding is not allowing things to move forward as fast as we want. And so your idea is to roll both back together into take care of the funding issue and the operations issue all together. Is that an accurate
Yes, and the
statement of your-
safety issue.
And the safety issue. But I wonder how far would we advance this problem in our country if we just took care of the funding issue well?
Like the government would just be able to fund all these updates? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, if we've got next gen fully going, fully installed, it's fully implemented, right? It's years behind now, but if that was done, how much better off would we be?
I think our efficiency and our safety would be a lot better off with these updated systems replacing our old old systems. But we still have the issue of politics getting in the way of air traffic control operations. So, like, during the past government shutdown, there was no funding, and a lot of the air traffic controllers didn't show up to work. And so if we say, yes, we fix the funding issue and we're able to implement all these new great technologies, we're still having the issue of politics leading to delays in our systems, and it's just a system where politics shouldn't influence flights.
So I just want to go back to the other end of it. I mean, sometimes a government agency is useful to have around if some disruptive event is going on in the market. So, for instance, in 2020, the airline passengers went basically away. So what would happen to all the fees going to this company?
So that's a great question. The legislation in the 21st Century Air Act requires this American Air Navigation Services Corporation to establish a reserve fund in case of times like this. So back in 2001, after the 9/11 attacks, the government in Great Britain actually had to bail out Great Britain's half-private system. And then that led to the concern about, okay, we need to create reserve funds for these companies. And so since then, none of the companies during COVID were able to pull from their reserve fund to help fund. So that would be what happened.
NextGen, it seems like there were some issues with bureaucracy, but did NextGen utilize any private contractors as well?
Like to implement the new
Yes.
technologies? So when the government does actually look to implement these new technologies, they work with private contractors to see, okay, who's going to offer us the best contract to install these new technologies. But the issue is with government contracts, a lot of extra fees are added because of the uncertain funding, because of the uncertain timeliness, and so they do contract with private technology companies to implement these new private companies are the ones creating the technologies that they implement, but the government contracts that they create with them become extra expensive.
So what tech needs to be replaced exactly? And then I have a follow-up once you kind of share that.
So in Newark International Airport, they're still using floppy disks. And there's also a lot of control centers that are still using paper flight models. So there's where they're on paper, they have little models of planes and they're tracking their movements hour by hour to see whether or not they're gonna hit. And we should probably put those in computers at this point to be able to track, and that's one thing. Another big thing is the radio communication systems. So right now, pilots will radio into the control centers, and that's how they're communicating with the controllers. But a lot of times what happens is while the pilots are talking, another pilot will come in, and they'll radio over, and they'll get cut out, or there's issue with accents and repeating, and there's been new digital communications that'll go directly to the cockpit that remove those obstacles and reduce the risk of pilots going over pilots to communicate with air traffic control. That's another issue that needs to be fixed.
So it kind of sounds like that would be kind of a money pit. Sounds like there's a lot of money that would need to happen. Are there actually private businesses that are raising their hand and saying, hey, I want to do that. I want to fix the broken system here?
So you mean the private corporation that this would create? So this isn't necessarily going to be a private corporation that's buying out this government system to create this new air traffic control corporation. It's just going to be the government employees are going to be transferred to this private corporation. The infrastructure is going to just be transferred to this private corporation. And the governance is going to be established in the transition period. So it's not going to be someone like a private company that already exists buying out this government system.
So just to follow up, it sounds like you're creating a monopoly.
Yes.
And sometimes monopolies need a little bit of regulation because, like she said, it's kind of a money pit. We could, buy this satellite technology. We could buy this other technology. Let's raise our fees. Let's sell more bonds to, just continue to get more techie, to save more passengers. What's going to stop that?
So the board of directors that this corporation established is made up of representatives of groups that are interested. So we have the pilots that are represented, the controllers, the airlines, airports, the government will have a representative. And these people, the airlines don't want to have to pay super high prices to fly in the system because that'll mean they'll have to raise their ticket prices and passengers will stop flying. And so I think that will discourage the unnecessary spending.
Is there a good example of this type of organization created by the government already in the United States? I mean, Canada has an example, but is there one domestically?
I haven't found something that's exactly the same as what I'm proposing. There's Amtrak, which was the trains, federally chartered, but it's a for-profit corporation that they established, not a nonprofit, so that's a little bit different. The United States Postal Service is a government corporation, so they have a little bit more borrowing flexibility, but they're still subject to congressional regulation of rates and borrowing limits. And then another example is during the recent spring partial government shutdown where TSA stopped getting paid, the Austin airport saw huge delays in their lines because not many TSA workers were showing up. But in San Francisco, the TSA there actually contracted out a private company to operate their safety checkpoints, closely overseen by TSA, and there were 0 lines in San Francisco. But that's just an example of like a singular private contracting at an airport. But those are the closest I found.
Okay, so I want to go a different direction here. Part of what you're saying is that by privatizing the U.S. air traffic control system, it would make it more safe, and that this has been done in Canada and others. So Canada, that's been going on since 1996. They've privatized. So have there been any studies that show fewer accidents or incidents in those countries compared to what we have here in the U.S.?
I don't know exact numbers about if their rates have decreased, but I do know that since 1996, Canada has not had a major air crash due to air traffic control, and the U.S. has had some recent incidents that could have come from air traffic control.
So, when does this company take over sort of the flight? Are they from Wheels Up all the way till Wheels Down at the other airport, or is there a local sort of air traffic controller that would be a separate sort of controller until they get up into the, I don't know, big highway?
No, they would be also from the moment you taxi out of the gate to the moment you land at your terminal, they would be controlling. So
makes sense for a Newark, because they've got lots of planes coming in and out. They produce lots of profit for this company, lots of revenue for this company. But what about these small airports? These small airports that have a few Cessnas going in and out every day. It's are they going to get cut out because they're not profitable for this company anymore? Is that a possibility?
I don't think, since this company is kind of a nonprofit, its main goal is not just we're going to cut all of our bad systems, or our not bad systems, our systems that don't make as much money. But also, one of the new technologies that other countries have been able to implement, and we could help implement in the U.S., is remote towers, where you install just digital surveillance around smaller airports, and a bunch of smaller airports can be regulated from one facility that has a bunch of cameras around. And so that new technology would actually help those smaller airports.
So I get a little paranoid, but what? So does that leave room for someone hacking into those systems with the new technology, and they're able to watch all of those and possibly intervene? Is that something that people would be worried about?
I don't think, at least right now, hacking into our air traffic control is a fear that I have. Also, I do know that one of the new technology updates also that would be implemented to help kind of transmit this data between these cameras and these remote control towers would be fiber optic lines versus copper wires. And these fiber optic lines are considered more secure and less hackable than the copper wires. So I think that would actually help promote national security.
I'd like to know a little bit more about the swamp, the government swamp involved here. So you mentioned that there's different government agencies that FAA has to work with, and it kind of bogs things down. Could you go into more detail about that?
So yes, a lot of the top management in the FAA currently has to respond to a bunch of different congressional committees. They have to respond to the Congressional Budget Office, the Government Accountability Office, multiple audit agencies, the White House Office of Management and Budget, the Senate and House committees on science and transportation, and the committees on appropriations in both houses. So they're basically having to work through all of these just to get their plans approved and their money approved.
I got to step in. We have like 5 seconds left, so I got to call it there. Let's give her a hand. That concludes this year's presentations. Let's have one more hand for all of our presenters. There's people still in the room. Great job, guys. All right, once again, the winner will be announced at graduation. So if you'd like to hear who eventually wins this thing, you're going to have to come to graduation. But till then, it's a secret. So nobody gets to know. Okay, off you guys go. I will see you next year.